Hi, this is Brian Banco from the Rocky View Entrepreneur Series, and today we're doing an update interview. This is interview number 2 with Laura Bechard, and Laura is from Provision Business Advisors, and her website is uh, www.provisioncoaching.ca, and her number, as you can see in the background there, is 403-650-6519. Laura is a CPA. She was a CMA before that. She has her MBA. She has a lot of experience, 25 years of experience in teaching business, and now she's consulting and coaching and helping people make a difference within their own businesses. So welcome, Laura.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, great to be on your program again. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. I thought we'd do an update because last time we talked a lot about COVID and how things were very negatively affecting things. And now the public health restrictions have been lifted, even though COVID is not over, and probably we can't predict when it'll be over. But I guess one of my questions is what is happening now, and what are some of the common things that people are coming to you with now that Alberta is open for business? And I shouldn't say Alberta because you deal with Western Canada. So now that we're open for business, what are things that are coming forth in your practice?
Great question, Brian. There's a lot of still continued uncertainty. I think that's one of the themes that we continue to see, that even though the restrictions have been listed, we had a number of months of 1 foot forward, 2 feet back, 1 foot forward, 2 foot back. And I think people are still not sure if we're on the cha-cha, which direction we're going here of the two-step. So there is still a lot of uncertainty. Of course, a number of those business owners who were closed for significant periods of time have been kind of moving forward with a little bit more optimism and gusto, I think, than some that were open and closed, open and closed, open and closed. Because as the human brain just sort of starts now predicting a pattern and saying, well, this is what happened before. Is this a familiar pattern? Are we going to go back? And so people are still moving very cautiously forward, even though, as you say, the restrictions have been lifted or are lifting in our sister provinces as well. So that brings with it a lot of how do I move forward, and almost information paralysis. People thinking that if I just wait for another week, I'll have more certainty. I just wait till next month, I'll have more certainty around the environment with which we are going to operate. So that's one thing I'm noticing. And the second thing I'm noticing, Brian, is that the entrepreneurs, the business owners, small business owners in particular, and we know some that have been very hard hit in our Alberta economy and tourism, hospitality, and a number of those businesses, there's nothing left in the tank. So they have exhausted their mental resources, they have exhausted their financial resources, and they're really not sure if they have any investment capital, any resources now to reinvest and go forward to start growing their business again. And so we're seeing sort of uncertainty on those two fronts.
Well, I guess that brings up the next question is like, this, it's all uncertain. So how you might, without giving away the end of the movie, because people should phone you for business advice, but what in general are you telling people at this time?
In general, what I'm telling people is that they've actually always been operating in an environment of uncertainty. They just have had their blindfolds on. And so during COVID and now post sort of COVID restrictions, the blindfolds are there's holes in them, and they're a little bit more open and off. And so they're seeing all of the uncertainty with which they were actually operating their business before. And when we think about uncertainty from a financial perspective, that basically talks about risk. So what is the risk of this business surviving, thriving, risk of the cash flows, risk of the lifestyle? All of those risks come into play. And so what we ask people to do is step back and actually do a little bit of a risk assessment. See, what are their risks from a people perspective, from a financial perspective, perhaps technology, security, liability, legal, all kinds of different aspects that are impacting their business. And then put those risks in one of 4 buckets. What are the low probability, low impact risks? So we've got a bunch that might fall in there. Then we might have a high probability, low impact risk. We put a bunch in there. And then, where are the high impact ones, the high, low probability, high impact, or high probability, high impact. So the ones that we really need to pay attention to are those high probability, high impact, because those are ones that we must do whatever we can to avoid those risks. Those that are, high probability, low, some of the other ones we can have, we can buy insurance products perhaps. We certainly review the insurance that we have for our business to see what we can insure and what is insurable. We can, anything that's low impact, low probability, we sort of put those on the green light, just accept those risks. If they do happen, they're not going to seriously, significantly impact our business going forward. And then risks that are in the low impact, high probability, or low probability, high impact would be ones we would try to reduce or mitigate those risks in some way, shape, or form. So the first, the first thing is just sort out your risks, identify what they are and sort them out. I like to use just Post-it notes and a sticky, and put some painter's tape on the wall, and then you can move them around. And then once we've identified what they are, then we can start working on those strategies to help reduce, mitigate, avoid, and just accept the risks that we have to. That's one thing that it was hard for me to become, I guess, have risk as a friend early in my career as the wife of a farmer, because Mother Nature throws a lot of risks at us and has thrown risks at us every year that we've been in agriculture. And this year's no different. So we went forward and put the crop in good faith, and did our rain dance at the appropriate time, but we did not get the rain, and we got extremely high temperatures. And if you've been watching the news at all, you know that Western Canadian ag producers are really going to have significantly low yields, if any yields, because of the weather that we've had this summer. So we've all, grown up with mitigating that risk by buying crop insurance. And so it's something that if you haven't been kind of working with along the way, you might not have even realized all of the risks that you were either avoiding or just accepting. And now that we did have a fairly significant disruptive event with the COVID-19 pandemic and the public health restrictions that came with that, business owners now have their eyes open to what risks they're actually facing.
Yeah. I see that as the key to jumping out of the cage now that the cage door has kind of been open since COVID isn't going away yet, but now that, the public health restrictions have been lifted, we can go about business as usual. In Alberta here, we say Alberta is open for business again. I think that looking at your risks and just determine what's holding you back is good. And the analogy is, like you said, a farmer who's had, let's say, 5 years of drought, on year 6, it's like, do I bother? What's going to happen now? And those that jump out and do it really well, maybe you'll have a bumper crop that year. I don't know if it really happens that way, but droughts don't last forever. So I think that's an excellent way to look at it.
Yeah, and I mean, we could mitigate that risk of drought if we invested significant money and capital in getting a water pipeline from the river. And when you think about the 3,000 acres we have or the size of crops, that's a lot of pipe and irrigation to be able to water your field crops. So we could mitigate that risk. We could avoid it if we wanted to put that kind of a capital investment into our business. We've chosen not to at this point, but when we look at some smaller farms and some of the market gardens, they absolutely have mitigated that risk by investing in irrigation technology.
Yeah, and then that brings up another question too. And looking at risk, have people kind of changed directions, or I don't imagine too many people would have completely changed businesses entirely. But have you had any observations on that, like, sort of operating within a certain sphere with their experience and maybe moving into a slightly different direction?
We have seen significant number of businesses that have been motivated to change their business model. So whether it was moving from a totally bricks and mortar model into now an online model, or a combination, we have more employers looking at hybrid staffing models. So looking at reducing their footprint in terms of having to rent and lease office space, which can contribute to their enhanced profitability and their value. We've seen businesses come in with a real mindset shift, because we used to have that mindset in many businesses that if I didn't see the whites of their eyes, the employees weren't working.
Mm.
And not really recognizing that the employees could be sitting at their desk or their cubicle and be daydreaming, distracted on their social media, listening to the hot tunes on their music, looking out the window, talking to their neighbor, and that even though they physically were in the building, they might not have been very productive either. And so now we have some businesses that have actually really had their eyes open to seeing how productive their staff can be when they're working from home. And those businesses were ones that actually set up good processes. So they were able to not duplicate, but come up with different kinds of structures in their daily interaction and engagement with their staff. So their staff continued to be engaged and productive, even though they didn't see the whites of their eyes. And I know my daughter is one of those who's been working at home for the year and a half, and they had their regular stand-up staff meetings every morning. They had their tasks delegated and what needed to be done by certain points of the day and how those projects needed to run. And they're a company that did it really well with continuing to have those virtual office processes and procedures in place, that the staff still felt connected to their fellow employees and their colleagues, and they were highly productive. Other businesses didn't fare very well with that, because they sort of just left people to their own, and didn't set up the environment within which that performance and that productivity could continue.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's music to my ears from two standpoints. One, I'm a big fan of the work at home environment, and also you and I are both cost accountants, certified managerial accountants. If you can save money, if you don't have to have the bricks and mortar, you save a lot of money. So
Yeah,
then,
and I mean, as a taxpayer, you might not like that very much, because we do have a huge problem with commercial office space being occupied here in Calgary in particular. But I mean, you certainly can really revisit your costs and your footprint with changing that mindset and those business processes. But it doesn't happen just by physically. It's sort of like kids playing. Like, you can't just put them in the play in the sandbox and expect them to play together. You have to set up the structure and the mechanisms for that to happen. And that's the same with an online workplace. We still have to have mechanisms for the water cooler conversation. We still need to have some of those social norms and celebrations that happen in a workplace that happen virtually. And they can happen virtually, but not without some intentionality around setting them up.
excellent. Well, that's one of the things that would help the hard hit entrepreneurs is the people that can make use of the work at home and save money that way. So one of the first two things we mentioned is that some of the people are waiting for next week, just wondering when the next thing is going to happen, when is the other shoe going to fall, when are we going to lock down again, and also the people that are have tapped their resources, and both cash wise and mental wise, and maybe they're suffering some burnout because they're just too busy worrying about what's going to happen next. In general comments, without any specifics, they have to call you for that. What in general are you advising people on in that way?
What I'm advising people to do is to really get their team together. And so working with their public accountant, working with their advisor, or some of them some of them have a life coach, and of course their banker being a key part of that team. And working together so that we can put the ecosystem around that entrepreneur. One of the things that I loved about the work I did in developing countries was the connection between the lender and the creditor and the support that was given the entrepreneur. So if you borrowed money from a particular lender, then that came with a business advisor who helped you decide how you were going to the highest and best use of those funds you were borrowing, and helped you get an ROI on that. Because that's, if we're providing a loan to an entrepreneur without some structure around helping them make good sound decisions about how to invest those resources, we may end up having the resources not benefit them to the extent that they were intended. Because they go in with wonderful plans, they go into the bank or their lending partner with a good business plan, but sometimes they need help on the execution of it. And that's really where I see the future coming for these entrepreneurs, is them having the team, their CPA being a big part of that team, then their lender or their banker being a big part of it, and then their business advisor helping them on the execution of those things.
And that's where you come in.
That's where we come in, and that's where we work hand in hand with people like you, Brian. You do the tax and compliance work, and we help them execute so that their profit is higher. So they, and of course, we help them understand why paying tax isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Exactly. Especially if they can pay less. But, well, I don't know, Laura, what haven't we touched on today that you'd still like to mention?
One of the other things that we're seeing, Brian, the work that we're working on with our professional services clients in particular is around the human beings. So as we start thinking about scaling up and growing our professional companies, accounting firms, law firms, IT managed services, HR firms, engineers, architects, all of those kinds of businesses, once they start scaling, they go from being a practice into being a firm. And as they start growing their firm, these businesses often need to grow by hiring highly educated, skilled individuals. So they're hiring articling students or interns of some sort who are working on their professional programs, who then become the professional that the PEng or the CPA or whatever that designation is related to that industry. But what often happens is that managing partner goes from an area of being a technical expert to now having to manage people. And sometimes that's not their forte. And they hire bright, talented individuals to come and work in their organization. And then they're all too often disappointed with the ROI on that investment. They're not getting the billable hours that they anticipated out of their team, or they've got too much rework, or people making errors, or not compliance with process. And so they become very frustrated and often think that they've hired the wrong person and they just need to clear house and hire again and everything will be better. Not necessarily. And so that's a lot of the work we're doing now in professional services, is helping those managing partners look at their hiring practice. Are they hiring the right people, meaning people that are aligned with their values? And then do they have them in the right seat? So are they hiring, and we often see them hiring people they like, people that have the academic background, but they may not have the experience that they need to put them into the seat so they can offload from the senior person onto them, which is often still the managing partner. So the managing partner has been the bottleneck, is overwhelmed with all the work they're doing with the client and the higher level technical work. And they're not hiring that high enough level individual so that they're actually getting that release from their work so that they can continue to build the business strategically, the investment, and manage their team. So we're doing a lot of work with professional firms now on their hiring practices, their people development, their people processes, and the environment within which they're managing this team so that we have the benefit of a culture improvement, we have more accountability, and we have people performing to the level of which they are capable.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds very helpful. If you can free up your own time and get the right people without turnover and without having to clean house.
Because that's very expensive.
I remember a stat I heard that it takes, if you pay somebody $50,000 a year, it actually takes $100,000 worth of investment to get someone up to speed. I don't think that's exactly accurate in modern day times, but it's a big expense to get someone up to speed. So to just fire someone and start again, you're really spending a lot of money.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there is a learning curve. And if we can really dial in on the process of how do we onboard someone, what's our human development plan? So what do we want them to be capable of doing, or what's the competency map that we need them to get to? Because sometimes we can hire someone at a higher level of competency and then end up having a higher salary, or we hire a new grad with a lower salary, but now we've got a longer roadmap and a longer runway to actually develop the competencies. And neither one's not right, one's wrong, but it's looking at what's the speed at which you want to grow your firm, and how, because you ultimately are going to need people at all levels within your organization so that you've got that career path and people being able to move up from an entry level position into a junior, into a senior, into a managerial, and ultimately perhaps become a partner or an associate.
Excellent. That's all excellent advice.
Yeah, because we don't want you just to close the doors at the end of the day and say, I want to retire and I'm just going to tell all my clients to go somewhere else.
Yeah, and you know, there's going to be so many opportunities post COVID whenever it does end. Like I think as we were mentioning, so many people are going to benefit from the work at home environment and all other changes that have made. I mean, it's almost like new industries have shot up as a result, new ways of doing things. So I think there's we've lost a lot, but we've got a lot of potential here to gain as well. So
Yeah, and many entrepreneurs have a lot broader perspective now. They actually have broadened their vision. They're not sort of just thinking about what's going on in my neighborhood. They're thinking provincially, nationally, internationally, and they have I think more insight into that. When we think about the SWOT, people do SWOT all the time in terms of business analysis, my strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But they haven't been doing the PESTLE, which is the political, economic, legal, technological, all the other environment within which our business operates. And this is something that COVID has got people thinking more about the environment outside of their business and outside of their industry that could have a very significant impact on how successful their business model is.
yeah, excellent. Well, I don't have any other questions. Anything else, Laura?
No, just if anyone would like to, I'm always up for a good conversation about business models, business plans, and different opportunities. So if anyone's interested in continuing the conversation, please do connect with me, and I'm happy to have a call and see if we can give you a couple of ideas.
Yeah, that's great. So I think Laura Bechard from Provision Business Advisors, again, her website is www.provisioncoaching.ca, and her number is back here, 403-650-6519. So thank you, Laura. Excellent interview, and I'll get this posted on Rocky View Entrepreneur Series, and we'll go from there. We'll do another update in 3 months or 6 months or whatever.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Laura. Bye for now.